Well, hello everybody. My name is Becky Metcalfe, and on behalf of Design Centre Chelsea Harbour, a very warm welcome to London Design Week. Gosh, doesn't it feel very festive out there? Really jolly and bright in the lovely sunshine. Well, it's lovely to be here in real life, and thank you so much for coming this afternoon. A little bit of housekeeping. If you could turn your phones off, that would be brilliant. Well, the idea of coming together seems particularly meaningful at the moment. So I'm so thrilled that Georgie Perman and Shane Brady and Tolu Adeko are here today to give us the inside track on those amazing welcoming places that also look great as well. Who better to speak to them than Carol Annett, Interiors Editor of Country and Townhouse. Let's give them a very big welcome.
Thanks, Becky. It's lovely to be here and lovely to see so many of you. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Georgie Pearman of Country Creatures, and Country Creatures own and operate and manage a family of beautiful places, including Double Red Duke and the Swan in the Cotswolds, and also about to open very, very soon, I think maybe even next week, Georgie, the Princess Royal on the Hereford Road. Shane Brady, known for his work with Corbin and King, and also just opened the Aubrey at the Mandarin Oriental and the Main in Mayfair, which queue here to get a ticket because I think it's quite hard to get in these days. And then Tolu Adeko, and we've never met before, so it's really lovely to have you here. Thank you. Who is you have a studio in Walton Street, but about to move to Greenwich.
Yep.
And you have worked on the Maze Grill, W Marriott Hotels, and also a couple of cruise lines. Which is very interesting, and you have a deep passion for art and design, as we can see, and a fantastic tailor.
What are you saying about us? What have we done this end?
It's gorgeous over there too.
Thanks,
Cheryl.
good.
Steady. So we're going to talk about creating convivial spaces. Shane, we'll start with you. What do you understand by a convivial space?
For me, it's, actually, I know we're designers, but for me, convivial is about the people that are in it. And if they're having a great time, then it's a convivial space. So I think fun, approachable, a sense of energy is what, for me, convivial is.
So what are the most important factors if, when you get your brief from the client, say it's a Corbin and King, whatever, what's your first thought with how it's going to be?
Well, I mean, layout, of course, is critical and key. I think that's how we approach all of our projects, with layout to begin with, in terms of making convivial spaces. I think it's also important to understand what the offering is. Is it from breakfast through lunch through dinner? Because convivial spaces change throughout the day, and what a convivial space might feel like in the morning is very different to what a convivial space would feel like at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night when people are finishing dinner and getting a little bit boozed. So it depends, but they are.
Yeah. And sorry, I should have pointed out that we're rolling some images here. So this is Country Creatures. Georgie, just introduce us a little bit to the brand, the people who may not know much about what you do.
So we operate, so we sort of will take on a property, develop it, and I do that side of it, so the design side of it. And then we also go on to the contracts of managing them as well on behalf of investors and clients. And so we have 3 in the Cotswolds. The one there is a 19-bedroom Cotswold stone hotel, I guess. It sort of feels like an inn. It's very sort of medieval. I think it dates back to the 1600s. Lots of big heavy beams and things like that. And then we also are doing things in London. So we've got 6 places in London. They're all sort of Zone 1 pubs, some with bedrooms and some without. And the one we're doing in Notting Hill only has 4 bedrooms, but we've got gardens by Ginny Blonde. And I think, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think it's one of the only places around that area which actually has gardens where you can actually dine out in.
Oh, wow.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
I'll just say
Sound
it's
bite.
fine.
Yeah.
And Tolu, tell us a little bit about the spaces that you have worked on, and for you, what's the starting point with a commercial project like a restaurant or something?
I think for every single project, it's all about trying to understand really what's desired from the operator, and kind of working, together collaboratively to try to address, like what Shane was saying, things starting off from the plan. So really understanding the plan, understanding the operation of the plan, how this would function, and then layering that with the understanding of exactly how this space would kind of materialize, and how this space, would almost add a sense of, that will give people memory. And for us, in every space that we try to design, we try to have that element of storytelling in making sure we're able to give people memories, not just memories for that particular time they go there, but if you can imagine just going in a space and enjoying it, and then maybe 4 or 5 years returning to that space, maybe with additional members, and then still remembering the past, but also remembering, oh wow, it's still well kept. So that idea of storytelling through time is really important, and that then mirrors into the selection of materiality that you use.
And actually, Shane, you talk about creating emotional connections to spaces.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with that, actually. I originally wanted to be a set designer for like the West End or Broadway. That's where I wanted to start, and my Irish parents.
It's never too late.
It's never too late, and I'm so young, so it's great. That's where I wanted to start. My Irish parents wouldn't let me, so I ended up in interior design. But for me, I always think that the spaces we create are places that people have their first date, where they might get engaged, where they might agree to a divorce, which can be a happy or sad, but it's true. All of these are like life events. Yes. It's where you meet your best friend. And so for me, it's about connecting people with those places. And what we really do is create the set for people's lives in a lovely way. So yeah, I'm obsessed with how people feel in our spaces.
I think that's one of the nicest things about what we all do is you two do it a lot better than me, obviously.
Why do you keep saying this?
But as in, you're creating spaces where people go out with their family and friends to have fun. And when you've designed something from scratch and you see it on plan, and then you actually see people there, having a glass of wine and laughing with their family and friends, it's a really lovely thing.
Yeah, no, it is.
Definitely.
I also, what interests me also is that, we're looking at, I think this is one of Emily's interiors. I think it's her, this is a residential project.
No, Shane doesn't do residential design. I'm really bad at it. So I stay to restaurants and bars, and Emily, my business partner, does the residential. Okay. Yeah.
So when you think of something like the Wolseley, which is a very big building, big, kind of the architecture, grand. And then compared to Georgie's as the sort of little inviting, but you
Nooks
still need
almost.
to you still need to create that inviting space, or like Tolu with a one of the images we've got coming up, which looks like this most fabulous bar, and it's actually on a cruise ship, which I thought was quite interesting. But you're creating spaces, whether they're big or small, that people want to go in. How do you get people to draw them in with a kind of wow? Do you need a focal point? What is it that brings people to a space, or that you think about, that you want people to remember?
A bar helps.
Bar definitely helps. Yeah. I think it's interesting you bring up the Wolseley as a place, for instance, because that's in terms of proportion, those ceilings are so high. I don't even know how high they are, and that can actually be to the detriment of a good space. I mean, obviously not the Wolseley, but it can be, because vast voluminous, is that a word? Spaces can sometimes feel like intimidating and uninviting. And I think I always say to our design team, you need to design everything that people are going to sit, touch, see in human scale. So even if you're in a very large volume space, everything feels considered to the human proportion. I actually think in the smaller spaces with lower ceilings, like the Albury at the Mandarin Oriental, they're much more exciting to make a convivial space, because you can create really dark pockets and a sense of journey through and intrigue. And then I think people want to meander through these spaces and find the little banquette near the window, or find the little table by the fireplace. And I think it just depends on the volume or the space you get.
I mean, the Wolseley is a stunning site. I mean, isn't it? Amazing and glamorous, and it's timeless. But I mean, were you involved in that when you were at David?
No.
No.
God, no.
But I imagine when you're given that's incredibly difficult space to visualize and work out, and yet they did it amazingly well, I think. But
so when you're looking at, for example, the Princess Royal, what's your starting point there for bringing people in and making sure that they're going to stay?
Well, it's very similar principles, really. I mean, we're quite lucky there because we've got sort of little courtyard. We've got a courtyard for sort of 20, and then at the back there's a garden for about 50 people. And then it's sort of split up with a conservatory, and then you walk in and the main bar's there. And actually what we did was, it was a sort of weird bar because it sort of went the entire length of one side, and we did what most operators would not do because it's not very sensible to use a lot of space, but we put a U-shaped bar in. You know, and actually it's taken up the whole room, and we've lost a lot of covers. And we're like, not many people are going to be able to get in here now. But it does look nice, I think. So,
Yeah.
and I think that is the key thing. If it looks nice, and when people walk in, and the first thing they see is a nice bar and people drinking at it, and seafood and platters coming out, it sort of draws you in, doesn't it?
I think, oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I think the other point in that, though, is spaces that I always say as well, it's far better to divide a large space into loads of smaller spaces, because restaurants will only have 5 people in them as they start service, and then it'll grow to 200, but then it'll drop down to 100, and then there'll be only 20 in it. And I think if you're in it, we've all been there, if you're in a really vast restaurant and there's just 6 tables, you feel a bit like an island in the middle of nothing.
Yeah.
But if you design a restaurant or a bar that the rooms can kind of open up and close down as need be, it allows, when it's quieter, really hubby, fun bar vibes in that room, and then as more people arrive, the other lounges can open up. It helps.
Yeah, I think when designing spaces, especially like a really large space, it's one thing dividing them, but almost designing taking time, I think, to design each section of the space is really important. Many times, we all know that deadlines and things such as, the high pressure and demands of getting a project done kind of sometimes could override that design process, but it's actually taking time to try to envision and try to experience before a physical thing exists, trying to experience it yourself mentally, and even if you could try to go to somewhere similar, just to kind of have that experience is really important. Making sure that you're able to kind of, in a space, allocate different parts of it. So like, for the person who's going to be just a couple, or maybe for the group that's a large family, or it might just be for that person that actually doesn't want to come with anybody. Sometimes, like myself, just goes there alone, and there's nothing wrong in that either. So trying to design a space that incorporates all of those different journeys into it is really important, and the result of that is that you get so many angles where you can take beautiful shots as an interior designer. That's the joy of it, because you can, once you've divided that space, you can then look at how you're going to dress it, how you're going to add the materials, how you're going to add the finishes to each of this space. And although it might be uniform finishes, you might be able to pick out them special spots and them special areas. And even it could be just, it's a small area, but it might just be something interesting on the table that you layered in, whether it's like an inlay of glass, whether it's a inlay of, veneers or marquetry. It could be whatever. But the idea of, once you divided the space, really designing it. And I think it's a shame because deadlines and the bigger the studio grows, sometimes, you can almost skip some of these joys, but it really is a joy.
And it's difficult, isn't it, the sort of layering, because you sort of finish a project and then you're thinking, oh, God, I wish I'd sort of added that.
Always.
And it's quite difficult. I mean, I'm always going back, adding things in. It's quite a sort of tricky process, really, isn't it?
Because it's very much so that process where, when you think of an artist, you firstly sometimes, it might start with a plain canvas, and you might paint it with one color, but then you might actually think, I want to add texture to it, and then you layer with something of texture, then you might think to yourself, I want to add, another layer to it. So it's constant, and I think sometimes actually the design process, before was a lot more given to that, and now, sometimes if one doesn't watch it, you can kind of be producing things like a factory where everything is on.
It's quite tempting to do that, though, isn't it? 'Cause I've got mood boards and everything in the office, loads of them, and I think, I could just use that again. No one will really know.
True.
But it's like, you think of the artist, most of the time, anyway, most artists, if you created something once, why would you want to redo it? It's boring, like give people something new, fresh, exciting every single time, and see each interior as a piece of art. Then that way you can kind of skip that, yeah.
I was And Georgie, I wanted to ask you about the bedrooms. I mean, for example, okay, the Princess Royal, you've only got 4 rooms, but will they be all completely different?
Yeah,
Will you have a story?
No,
or a
I
colour?
like to make my life incredibly difficult. So instead of having like one sort of theme that I do across all the bedrooms, I tend to, well, actually, no, so like, for example, where we got 19 bedrooms at the Double Red Duke, and I would have 5 different themes, but then I can mix things in and change stuff. So they all look slightly different. But the Princess Royal, they are quite different because there's only 4 of them, so you can
Have
go a
fun.
bit crazy.
Yeah.
And what about materials? I mean, when we now look at, this is the Cafe Wolsey
That's Cafe
at Vista
Wolsey at
Village.
Vista, yeah.
That was my one.
That was yours. Yeah, you did great there. I loved what you did there.
It's claiming everything.
What do you, because it's a commercial space and being used all the time, do you have to choose different materials than you would necessarily in a residential project?
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, loads of a lot of, or most of the restaurants and bars we do generally are throughout the day, morning through night. So they take an absolute battering. That's Anya Hindmarsh's cafe on Pond Street. And so, yeah, we're extremely mindful of it. I mean, sometimes it can be quite frustrating because you want to put in something beautiful, but it just won't survive. And then you'll have an operator or client complaining that, you spent £10,000 on a rug and it's lasted 4 days. So you have to be, but it's true, but you have to be mindful of that. But I think also there has to be a little bit of leeway. Some things have to go in that maybe aren't fully practical and will need to change out. I think that we no longer live in a world where things have gone in and they're there for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I like to think, or I always say to our team, if I see any of our restaurants being ripped out, I'll be really upset. But back to your point, layering in over the years is completely fine. And I don't believe, sometimes we get projects that were previously restaurants or bars, and I don't believe in ripping them out to a white box and starting again, because I just don't think that's very responsible as designers. So try to keep some and then embellish and layer on and make it better.
Yeah. And what about on a ship, Tolu?
Yes, on a cruise ship, like, hospitality, land-based projects, you tend to want to use the most amazing projects, and I mean, amazing finishes.
Can you point out when we get to it so that we know which
Yeah,
one?
this is on a cruise ship, for example.
is it?
Yeah, what you're looking at right now. But the key thing with, on marine interiors especially, you're constantly looking to source and to supply finishes that are really robust. So, you need to make sure that, a lot of the materials meet IMO, which is like International Marine Organization, for those who don't know. And you're trying to create spaces where, unlike most of the times on cruises, it's quite thematic. It's quite, you can kind of see it's a bit dated. And, what we do is try to design it like a land-based project, but sourcing materials that's going to last the test of time. But like what Shane was saying is that you sometimes still want to add that aspect of luxury inside of it. You don't want everything to be laminated and just
Rigid.
rigid. So you do need to add a level of special finishes inside of it. And sometimes it's almost choosing, because there's a tight budget, choosing where you put it. And for me, it's always the places where people are going to see it the most, but they're not going to touch it. So
Okay, nice.
Nice. I like
so
that.
the back of the maitre d', it tends to be, you're all going to see it, because you're going to have to come in and say, hi, my name is so, I've got reservation for 2. But the back of it is, to me, one of the best, the best backdrops. Because,
So where the maitre d' stands?
yes,
Okay.
because the back of it, you can't, most likely, you don't.
You're not gonna touch
you don't
it.
touch it. You don't.
Yeah.
But you see it, and it's a really good point for me. So there's always spaces that people are going to see a lot, but they're not going to touch it. And especially the back of bars, as well. You're going to always go to the bar for that gin and tonic, or depending on what you like, it might be something else. So so it's trying to understand exactly that, and trying to work in that remit where you can then have that balance of what the operator likes, in terms of it's cheap and it doesn't cost them too much money, and what you like as a designer, something that's going to
That's really interesting, actually. Georgie, what about you about putting? I mean, I hate the word wow factor, but focal points in the hotels and pubs. Is that an important part?
Well, actually, I hadn't really thought about it, but I think I do it naturally, because you were just saying that, and I was sort of thinking, oh yeah, that's a good point. But actually, I do things.
Yeah.
like for example, the Double Red, I found in this reclamation yard this amazing sort of panelling and stained glass that had it came out of a Kent manor house, listed manor house. And I just sort of happened to be online, and it was there, and I was like, right, I'm getting that. That's going to look amazing. And because we were building a massive extension onto an old listed building. So I think with these things, and the same with Princess Royal, where I've got a huge sort of chandelier. Well, it's not a chandelier, but like a really beautiful art piece above where the maitre d' and everyone will be standing. So I think, you do that. But I hadn't really thought I did it until you said it just now. Yeah, but I think it is important that.
Shane, talk us through some of your favourite places that you've designed, and why is it that makes them special?
I think the Albury and the Mandarin Oriental opened 5 weeks ago, and that is the lower ground of the Mandarin Oriental. Ceiling heights are so low, 2.3, 2.2 in places, so low. But we just embraced it. I mean, I timber clad most of them, which you probably shouldn't do, but it feels great. So the curio.
Why do you say you probably shouldn't?
Well, you probably shouldn't in terms of like dark, heavy ceilings in low ceiling spaces, and it all comes down on top of you, and it's all. But actually, it makes the ceilings feel a bit bigger. Surprisingly, we're all a bit shocked. Love when that happened. No idea what was happening. I was like, oh, that worked. We'll move on successfully. So the curio lounge in there, I think, is really beautiful. But I think that there it's got to do with like proportion of sofa or banquette sizes, proportion of table, and proportion of chair. All of our Corbin and King restaurants are very much designed to eat in, and I think that they're not known for lounging there for like 5-6 hours. So the scale of their furniture that we do is very tight and compact, but beautifully finished. Here in the Mandarin Oriental, it was like deeper, lower backed. So I think all of that adds to the sense of relaxing and being able to kind of chill out for a few hours there. I also think it's really important when you're designing all of these layouts to really check, to your point, Lou, about where the 2s are going, where the 4s are going, and where the 8s are going, because 8s can be you can live or die by an 8 in a room, because a group of 8 can destroy the atmosphere of a room, or they can really make it. So you just have to be really clever over where you place them, and you don't want. I'm obsessed with putting in tables for one. I think it's so important. So in Shoe we had 2 tables for one, and they were the best tables in the house, because I think that if you go by yourself, you want to have a really lovely seat and see the whole room, see the theatre, people watch. That's really important. Things like that are so important. But the main is great too. I mean, the drawing room in the main is beautiful. It appears there somewhere. It's with the big palms, so that's a really beautiful space as well.
Also the practicality of like you're there with your squares, and you can make 2s,
You can
4s,
make
6s, 8s.
exactly. Yeah.
Georgie, what I'm also interested in what you do, because with Shane and Tolu, it's the interiors, but you look after the whole package. So you're thinking about the food and what's being served on the plates in your restaurants, and that whole kind of look and feel. So where does that come in, that aspect? Do you start thinking about that straight away?
I'd love to claim that I did all of it, but no, I don't. I think what happens is, so we have the building, and Sam, my husband, was a trained chef, so he's thinking about the food, and now we're working with Seb and Laura. Seb worked with Corbin and King and Nick Jones and everyone. He's an amazing restaurateur, and Laura opened Sexy Fish, and so they're in our team now, along with amazing chef Ben Tish. So we're all sort of, Ben and Sam will be doing menus, and Laura and Seb will have a big input on that. I sort of go, I don't want that, or I want that. So but we start with the building, then the menus, the wines, and everything. And then it's how it's all going to work operationally. So I sort of come up with like, this is what I like, and this is, and everyone's like, well, that's awful. No, I'd never do that. Or often we leave it a bit later than that, where everyone doesn't really focus on, because everyone's so busy. And then they come in at the end of the project. This is normally my husband, Sam. He's like, why did you do that? What have you done? That doesn't work at all. We were talking about that. You have to get the operations team involved in right at the very beginning, because otherwise
they're going to be using the space.
Yeah, and sometimes you can you do what you think is going to look amazing and beautiful, but it just doesn't really work operationally. Or that's
I think it's so important. Like, I can't stress the importance enough to work together as a team on especially on every hospitality project. the operators and the people who are going to use the space on a
Yeah.
daily basis, they've got most of the time anyway. You get one or two that don't, but most of them, they've got a range of experience of what a similar restaurant that they've managed before, the greats of it, the really bad things inside of it. So having that input into the design from a very earlier on, it just helps you in all parts of the process. Sometimes they want to have too much input, so you need to kind of know where to kind of tell them, well, they're not the designer in that way. But as a whole, it really makes, I think it really makes the whole experience, one could put the most luxurious finishes, the most luxurious fabrics in a space, but if the service and the operators are not using it right, then really there's no luxury inside of it. The materials don't make it alone. So working together with the operators and being able to kind of make sure that that luxury finish, that well thought of interior matches the way it works. That's really what you get. To me, that's really what makes the project, and that's what makes a really a space that you want to come back to over and over again. I've been to so many restaurants that it looks amazing, but the food was rubbish and the service was slow. And I was thinking to myself, like, I could say it looks good, but would I go back again? No. So if I don't go back, and if many people don't go back, then what's the, is it going to last?
It doesn't matter how beautiful it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then
I think that's what Corbin and King do so well. I mean, people don't really come to Corbin and King for the restaurants. They are beautiful, but they come for the people. They come for the staff, and they come for
the
Jeremy.
service.
They come for the service.
Georgie, I wanted to ask you about colour. I mean, that's what draws my eye to these images. But colour, you're not playing safe by using colour. You're not necessarily. I mean, and a lot of the wallpapers and things you're using are quite bold. Is that just a natural part of what you do? Is that how you like to live and see interiors?
No, I mean, I wish I did live with
No, I hate it.
ghastly. At home, it's funny, isn't it? Because when you do your own house, because you're planning this right from the beginning, so every detail you think about and you put it all together and you see whether it works or not. But when you're doing it at home, it's not like that. It's sort of, we've had our sofa for like 15 years and I want to repaint or do something and it doesn't quite work because you haven't planned it out right from the beginning and put all the finishes, all the colours, the sort of light fittings, the bed rugs or whatever it is all together at the same time. And I think, I hadn't really thought about that I use quite wacky wallpapers and stuff, but I guess I do, yeah. Just looking at that one there. That's actually a bit fabric-y, that sort of, Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's one of the good things. I mean, as in, I can experiment quite a bit because I can't sack myself.
Yeah, that's really true, though, actually.
Yeah.
That is an interesting angle as a designer,
Yeah.
that you are the client as
And the
well. So that
designer.
as a result, it's fine if it goes
It's
wrong.
fine,
You're like,
yeah.
who's going to punish me?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. You can use any finish. It doesn't really last
It doesn't
very
really
long.
matter.
Then it
Sam,
doesn't
we
matter.
need more money.
No, I'm being very flippant, but
No.
I wanted to ask you also about the lighting, because obviously that can swallow a massive part of your budget.
Yeah.
But there, on one of the images here, we're on top of a bar. Is it a Zurich project? I think it has the most beautiful.
It might be it might be the
lights
bar
on
in Zurich where we do the hotel. Yeah, maybe.
on the bar.
Yeah,
top.
with the rings and the globes.
But are they
Yeah.
also used as dividing spaces?
So I have this thing about the fact that light can make you feel like you're in a group, even if you're sitting in a line. So the
Okay.
idea being that if you're sat at the bar and there's two of you side by side, if there's a light between you, you get a pool of light between you, and it makes it feel like it's your own table, even if there's another 10 people left and right. Yeah. So on bars, I'm obsessed with it. On the bar at the Albury we just did, I actually chopped the bar up into individual, almost like drinking ledges for two people the whole way along, so that it felt like proper date night the whole way along. For me, lighting is key. I always say that it doesn't really matter if I pick a really great finish or I do a really beautiful design. If it's not lit well, it doesn't really matter. And the other problem is that you'll have spaces like that get amazing light across the lake the whole day. That's Zurich.
That's in Zurich.
Yeah, that's in Zurich. And I mean, London weather, we're used to it. We get a lot of grey light. But you have to be able to, you have to work with light so that as a result, the space can go from day to lunch to night. And I think that's so important. I think you want everybody to look really nice. I mean, we all want to go out and feel like we look our best. So lighting is so important for that. And I think the other place where people sometimes go wrong, and I was at a hotel the other day and I was like, oh God, you have to have levels of light. And I don't mean light intensity. I mean, you have to have, I mean, this room isn't helping my example, but you have to have ceiling fixtures or something to create energy and excitement up there. But then you definitely need wall lights coming down, and then you also need table lights, and then you also need low-level lighting. I was never a huge fan of it. I'm becoming a bit more okay with it.
Too.
But you need low-level lighting as well, and so that as a result, you've got a journey through the whole kind of levels. When we did Brasserie Zadel years ago, that was a listed interior, but we just knew we had to get some form of pendants off the ceiling, because otherwise it was just going to feel like this vacuous space up there that just feels empty. So lighting is critical. You need to work with a very good lighting designer as well. And it's very hard because lighting is intangible. It's not like you can say to a client, that's the light. You can't until you're in there and making it work.
I think I agree. You know, when it comes to lighting, it's so important. I don't think lighting designers are rated enough. They are the secret to every great looking interior. And just actually, you know, having the mixture of, you know, floor lights, table lights, pendant lights, it's so important. Trying to get the same, for me personally, I kind of like the same type of temperature in all of the lighting, so we can have that consistency. But definitely layering the space with different sorts of lighting is really important. For me also, it's not necessarily about finding one beautiful light and making it uniform all throughout the space, but it's about trying to, you know, add charm to the space by incorporating different aspects and different types of lighting. So you might find something that's antique, then you might find something that's, you know, new, contemporary, and trying to mix these into the space. You know, before I used to almost look at lighting as a uniform thing. Okay, but if I've got that type of pendant light, then surely it must be the same thing for the wall scones and then for everything else. So it all looks alike. But actually now I'm embracing more the diversity of lighting and making, and it actually adds to the space looking more charming and more curated rather than something that's been created and designed.
It makes such a huge difference there. I mean, as operators as well, you know, you can think you walk out and you think, oh, it looks really nice, and then you come back in on a Saturday night at like 8 p.m. and the lights are all on full blast, and you're like, oh my God. So now we do all, you know, the automated Lutron or mode systems, and they're all set throughout the day, so they change at different levels throughout the day, and actually, it's just guaranteed then that you just know on a Saturday night you're not going to walk in with Celine Dion Sorry, I think Celine Dion blaring and the lights white. You know,
leave Celine out of this.
What about talking about antique lighting and stuff? What about mixing old and new and old? You know, can you incorporate old finds? Or do you go sourcing?
I think it's important it's back to that point of not throwing things out. I think it's really important to incorporate old finds. We should try reuse as much as we can if it's the right aesthetic. I mean, I think our studio is probably known for designing a lot of bespoke things as well, which I would be passionate about because I think it sets the project apart from any other if it's got its own custom designed lighting or custom designed furniture. But I think mixing is important. I think as well, to Lou's point, it's also, it adds an eclectic layer, so it just feels a little bit more appealing and inviting to the eye. I mean, in the past, we would always design everything almost militantly to be of a series, but that's not actually very human. So it's nice to have. And also, I think it's quite fun to throw in a light that maybe throws opinion. Why not? I mean, it's just design. We're allowed to have fun with it as well. It doesn't have to be so serious.
Tolu, you want to
I was just going to say, you know, especially when I love bespoke lighting and I love designing, you know, and referencing, like, you know, the amazing architects and designers of the past, and also referencing some of the new experiences of today. But I think actually some of the problems is that sometimes, you know, you get, like, you know, manufacturers, when you try to get them to make these things, you know, we want a quantity of 20, we want a quantity of of 50 for this. And I think, the whole industry is going to slowly start changing, where there's no longer that thing of minimums, most of things are going to be bespoke or customized to a certain degree, and it's actually allowing people to have that opportunity to have a small quantity of this and a small quantity of that. Because hospitality, when you really think of it, comes from the word hospitable, and to be hospitable is to feel welcomed, to feel at home, and creating that at such a vast quantity in a militant way doesn't give you that. It gives you
that's so
robotic.
true.
And if
So
we are
true.
hospitality designers, then we really need to constantly think of every large project as lots of small miniature projects, and with miniature quantities and with miniature, unique aspects inside of them. And, this is what gives you that warmth, and this is what gives hospitality, and obviously let's not take the important part of, hospitable services, and going back to operations, they need to, they need to do their part with it as well. But mixing that with the design aspect and, the custom aspect really would give, the best mix.
And Georgie, what is it, do you think, about the places that you create that makes them so successful? I mean, did you start off with it because you couldn't find the kind of places that you wanted to go to have a drink or have a meal or stay for the weekend? Was that what spurred you on?
No, not really. I think ours have just sort of evolved, and people approach us to do things, and we either like the project or don't like the project. It's in a good area, it's not a good area, the buildings are nice, and you kind of fall in love with the property. Well, a lot of our properties, a grade 2 list or starred or whatever, and so we're dealing with sort of historical buildings, and you kind of fall in love and visualize the project and envisage people. Say, like, we did 131 in Cheltenham, which was a sort of 30-bedroom boutique hotel, and that was an empty office block, grade 2 star listed, and it had been derelict for like 10 years, I think, or longer. But you can sort of just visualize, well, the bar, the people, the atmosphere there, and so ours sort of starts quite organically like that, really, I think.
And what about you, Shane? Are you propping up some luxury bar of a Monday night?
Every day.
But is that where?
What's the actual question? Sorry.
No, but to really kind of learn and to move it on. I mean, I love your Bob Cité, where you sit and then you have a little press for champagne,
Yeah.
little buttons by the.
Going to be using that
That's
in the
just
next
Yeah.
project. I
genius,
love that idea.
Absolutely lovely. I mean,
Yeah.
Presumably you have to go out and about, see what people are doing in order to be able to.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's really important to see what loads of different operators, different designers are doing to be inspired. So yeah, without doubt, checking out everything that is going on. And I think you can pick up little nuggets of any project and kind of go, oh, I like what they've done there. I'm going to take that. Like I said to you earlier, the umbrellas, I'm obsessed with the red and white ones just because of the apron on them or the valance. So I think it is really important to get out there. And I think the thing that I also say to our team is, I think there's kind of an intimidation about sometimes going to some of these places that can feel too fancy when you're younger as well, or you're just finished uni or whatever, and you think, oh, I can't go in there. But I say to them, go in and have a coffee. You don't have to spend a bar bill of £200 to go and see it, and then go to the toilet. I'm obsessed with toilet design. Go to the toilet, see what they've done in the toilets, and then it doesn't have to be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say the toilets here? They've got Toto toilets here. Lovely. It's so true. It's the whole space, isn't it? There's not really any little nook or cranny that you can forget about.
Well, and this is my sort of small problem with the Aubrey and the Mandarin Oriental. The toilets are part of the hotel, not part of the offering. So when you leave the Aubrey to go to the toilet, you end up in very nice but hotel toilets, and I think that breaks the romance or the story or the whole experience. So it's interesting. Toilets are really important.
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
So it's the theatre of it all. So, like, have you been to any of the Big Mama restaurants?
Oh, yeah.
There's one on Charlotte. But, when that one near Charlotte Street, and it's sort of just so much
It's
theatre
really
about it
nice. Yeah,
all.
it's
I mean,
mental.
it's yeah,
The
amazing.
new one in Covent Garden is
been
even
to yet.
crazier.
Is it?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
You can't get to the toilet for the
But it-
Instagrammers.
Yeah, but it is an experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
You
it
know,
is.
You sort of
Yeah,
walk
yeah.
in and the sort of, you just know that you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Where I haven't eaten in any of them yet, but I've tried, and I can never get in. But you know, it's sort of walking in and just sort of feeling like you're going to have fun.
Yeah. Which
You
is
know,
the
that's-
energy in the air. Yeah.
Tolu, I just wanted to ask you about collaborations and what role they play in the work that you do.
Yes, collaboration for me is everything. Like before, I think my take on design was more so as the designer, you just design everything. But over the years, myself and like the people I work with in the studio, we've started to collaborate more and more, like on everything. If you've got a special finish like we was talking about before to the back of a maitre d' or something, well, regardless of what the material is, if there's an artist that you're working with, give them a very loose brief. Don't be so controlling over it, and just give it to the people who you know that you can work with and you can trust with it, because the result of it is like art from different perspectives. So you've got the artists adding their input on that. Maybe you've got a lighting designer or a lighting company who you've given them this brief, you've given them this reference, but they've added their own to it. And again, each project, only becomes more beautiful and only becomes more meaningful by that collaboration. So constantly working to collaborate, and no man's an island when it comes to design. And the success of the project is not down to one individual, but it's a collective teamwork. So working with different suppliers, making sure that even if it's like a custom fabric, sometimes whether it's a particular type of shade you want in that particular color, working with a specialist. There's a specialist in everything, down to specialists who would make unique piping for things. And I'm really starting to love this. The only issues about it is sometimes you might get the specialists who they're like across the other part of the world, and you need to then think to yourself, is it really sustainable for me to be able to just for a collaboration of piping go all the way to France, for it? But nevertheless, collaboration is so important in design, and we should continuously work in that way.
Totally. I think
agree.
you need to respect the craftspeople.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say as designers, we don't actually do anything because everyone else builds it first.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting there building a table. I mean, what would that look like? But as a result, you're totally reliant on the craftspeople. And I think that if you try to push a material in a direction it's not meant to be going, it's already a losing battle. So you need to listen to the people who know how to work with that material to get the best out of it.
Yeah. And Georgie, what about on your projects? Do you try and use local craftspeople? Or is it?
Yeah, I do try to, and we work the same as you, collaborating with all sorts of, whether they're sort of fabric producers or bathroom manufacturers, bar manufacturers, but strange enough, most of them are made in the UK because I just find it easier dealing, when you need samples or
Customs.
and everything. It's just so much easier, and dealing with someone who's nearby. And I'd say if you need marble or something, and they're saying it's 6-month lead time and stuff like that, that's a different issue. But actually having that personal relationship, I think, with people nearby is much easier. I mean, you were saying that about moving your offices, weren't you? That actually a lot of the people that you're working with are closer to you.
It's in South, so it's all about, and I think the beauty of it is that you've got then this bigger bubble, especially when it comes to when the project is finished and the press on the projects, because as a design studio, press is obviously incredibly important to get the project seen by as many people as possible. So the great thing about collaborating is that that one project might have 50, 60 different angles of collaborations inside of it, and you can imagine how far that would go, rather than we designed this interior and we made the table and we made the chair. Probably wouldn't last long anyway.
And what about? I'm longing to know what you feel somewhere that you really nailed it, that you absolutely got the project right.
Wow.
Ooh. That's a daunting question. I try.
This is taking a twist.
I try not to. in every project, I think going back and revisiting it, you always see areas of improvement. Like when we were doing the bistros for a particular cruise liner, and we done 3 of the different bistros, and from the first one, going back on the cruise and actually seeing how it's been operated and used, actually maybe not this material, maybe we need to add that detail there, and again, so it just kind of elevates over time. So I think for me personally, I try to, and the studio try to focus on quality, and having quality is what's driving us. So, what's the quality of this? Can we improve on the quality rather than can we improve on the design, if you get what I'm trying to say? Because I think when you focus on quality, again, the result is more long-lasting. And when you focus on design, I guess it's all by a trend, which will at one point change, and you go back and it'll probably be refurbished. So, yeah.
Yeah. Georgie, what about you?
She's going down the line. I thought she was going to finish it.
I know.
We'll just leave now.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I go into any of the projects that we've done, I never want to start from scratch again, but I definitely want to start redoing things. But I think I'm quite lucky in that way, because again, where you two have to step away and you then say, I've done it now, and you can't keep walking back as a fully operational. I mean, if you did that with Corbin and King, you'd get sacked very quickly. Right? I want to change this. I want that. Whereas I can actually sort of keep adding and keep layering and stuff. So I think mine is much more of a gradual process, because I can just keep going. I can never stop and keep going for years. So I do have to rein it in, otherwise we'd be bankrupt.
Exactly, budget.
Yeah.
All right, Shane, if you don't want to tell us tell us what you're working on and what
I
you're
definitely
doing.
can't tell you that. So I'll have to tell you what I designed well, won't I? It's interesting though about going back in and layering on again. For me, I come back to it being a stage set. So in my mind, once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And that's how it should look. And so if I go back in and Jeremy King has added an art somewhere, I'm like, no, that's not meant to be
Do you
there.
get involved in the art as well?
Yeah, all the art.
Yeah.
the whole
I couldn't
crew.
do it unless I
Yeah.
did the art and stuff
Yeah,
as well.
so, but I think that, for me, it's very much, they're always a moment in time. So I then love them. For me, Fisher's is one of my favorite restaurants we've ever designed. And that's not from an aesthetic perspective, although I do love it. It's because it was our first collaboration with Jeremy after I set up Brady Williams. And it was a true collaboration on making something really beautiful. And we look after the estate of Corbin and King now. So if there's a problem, we'll go back in and look at it and see how it can be fixed. And Fisher's is the only restaurant that has never had a problem. We've never had to go back in and fix anything. So it holds a little special place in my heart.
I like the lights on the outside of Fisher's. I've got a photo of that actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And they
I'm
do
glad I
very,
inspired.
very good desserts too.
They do.
Yeah.
Cooking them and rolling them out across the world.
Oh my God, I love it. Commission again, please.
And what about you, Tolu? Have you got your eye on a big, a nice hotel coming up?
Currently, I obviously can't say much, but we're working on a hospitality project in Galicia in Spain right now.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because, again, it's collaborating with people locally and trying to see how we can get the aesthetics and the quality of what we want, but within, with using local source people. But there's so much amazing manufacturers in Spain for lighting, especially. It's
amazing.
really good.
Spain's great.
So it's a very exciting, it's quite long-term project, but
Exciting.
It's very exciting.
And Georgie, after next the Hereford Road one, Princess Royal, have you got more coming up?
Then we've got one that opens in Mayfair in September, so that we go on to the next one. And then we've got a sort of rolling refurbishment project of the 6 existing sites. So that's redoing the bedrooms and restaurant spaces and things like that. So that will go on for quite a while, I think. So 2 this year. We're just going to have to sort of slowly do that. And then, we've got 3 lined up for next year as well. And I'm sure more will get added on as we go along, but
And I'm sort of also slightly fascinated, Shane, does this ever make you want to have your own bar or restaurant? Or
Yeah, we've Emily and I have talked about
Have
this
you?
a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
we talk about it a lot because Emily loves all of the accessories and everything. And you look at somebody like Roman and Williams who have some of their own restaurants and then they have their own accessories and all of that. And it's a whole lifestyle brand. I mean, I couldn't run, obviously, a restaurant or bar because I drink the profits. So
We just bring in Seb and Laura and Sam.
Yeah, exactly. We
and
bring Seb and
everyone,
Laura and everyone in. I've thought about it. I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to focus on designing other things. I love designing restaurants and bars, but I think we were discussing it earlier. As a designer, you can design anything. So I'm dipping my toe into designing other things. Watch this space.
Exciting. Exciting.
So yeah.
You've already got furniture though.
We have furniture already. We've
Yeah.
one collection of furniture, and there might be another one. But yeah, just other things, and maybe one day a West End stage set.
Ooh. And you were talking about you're doing
Yeah,
fabrics. maybe?
textiles, and coming from a family of a heritage of textile weavers and designers. For me, it's again the next step is not necessarily just designing interiors, but also focusing on what you're saying, other aspects of design. So for me, I'm looking at lots of product and accessories design, but again, I don't want to necessarily design them myself. I just want to collaborate more with other people doing great things and kind of mix ideas together and collaborate. So hopefully the future has some of that going on.
Well, I think we've been extremely lucky to have the three of you here. Thank you so much. It's been really, really fascinating. Becky, I'll pass it back over to you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to go out.
Gin.
Goodness me, haven't we learnt so much this afternoon? How to divide a space in a restaurant, creating that sense of theatre, adding finishings, the use of colour, making use of what you had, which I thought was very interesting, that crucial role of lighting from day to evening to night, all that eclectic layering to give that inviting appearance, creating energy. Do you want it to be relaxed? Do you want it to be fun? Shane, you said it's all about life events. Those people having those first dates, I thought that was just so charming and connecting people with the place. Well, thank you for connecting with us this afternoon. It has been thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Tolu. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Shane. Let's give them a big round of applause.